I never believed in curses, not until I heard the whispers. It started with a dare. My best friend, Alex, had always been the adventurous type, dragging me into his harebrained schemes. This time it was the Whispering Woods, a stretch of forest on the outskirts of town, infamous for the stories surrounding it. People claimed to hear voices there, soft murmurs that seemed to follow them, growing louder the deeper they ventured. Some said the whispers were warnings. Others believed they were invitations. Either way, no one stayed long enough to find out. The stories never scared me, not really. They sounded like something out of a campfire tale exaggerated over time. But Alex was obsessed. He'd spent weeks researching local legends and even found an old newspaper article about a man who disappeared in those woods decades ago. His body was never found, only his journal turned up, pages filled with frantic scribbles about voices that knew my name. Alex convinced me to go with him that Friday night. "It'll be fun," he said, flashing that grin of his, the one that always got him out of trouble. "Besides, you don't believe in any of this crap anyway." I didn't. Not until that night. The woods were darker than I expected. The towering trees blocked out most of the moonlight, leaving only faint patches of silver on the ground. Alex carried a flashlight, its beam slicing through the shadows as we followed the narrow trail deeper into the forest. At first, it was quiet, eerily so. No rustling leaves, no chirping insects, just the crunch of our boots on the dirt path and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Then I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, almost imperceptible, like the rustle of fabric or a breath too soft to notice. I stopped in my tracks and turned to Alex. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" He shone the flashlight at me, his expression skeptical. I shook my head. "Never mind." We kept walking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The whispers grew louder as we moved deeper into the woods. Not words exactly, but a series of hushed tones that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Alex didn't seem to notice. He was too busy snapping pictures and jotting notes in his journal. "Do you think it's true?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "The stories about people hearing their names." I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. "Probably just their imagination." Alex grinned again and turned back to his flashlight beam. "Guess we'll find out." The trail ended abruptly at a clearing surrounded by gnarled trees. In the center stood an old stone well, its surface cracked and weathered with age. Alex's face lit up when he saw it. "This is it," he exclaimed, rushing forward to examine the well. I hung back, uneasy. The whispers were louder now, persistent and rhythmic, like a chant just out of earshot. My skin prickled as I scanned the clearing for movement, half expecting someone, or something, to emerge from the shadows. Alex leaned over the edge of the well and peered inside. "Hey," he called out, his voice echoing slightly. "You think there's anything down there?" "Don't," I said automatically. He laughed and pulled out his phone to take a picture. That's when I heard it again, a whisper, but this time it wasn't random noise. It said my name. I froze, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The voice was soft but unmistakable, a raspy murmur that seemed to come from right behind me. "Alex," I whispered urgently, "we need to leave." He didn't look up from his phone. "Relax," he said dismissively. "There's nothing here." But there was something here. I could feel it now, pressing in on us like an invisible weight. The whispers were everywhere, overlapping and growing louder until they became a cacophony of sound. And then they stopped. The silence was deafening, a void so complete it felt suffocating. Alex finally looked up from his phone and frowned. "What's wrong?" he asked. Before I could answer, something moved in the shadows behind him. A flicker of motion, too quick to identify, but unmistakably real. "Run," I managed to choke out. Alex didn't argue this time. He grabbed his flashlight and bolted toward the trail with me close behind him. The whispers returned as we ran, angry now, their tone sharp and accusing. "You shouldn't have come," they seemed to say. We burst out of the woods minutes later, panting and disoriented but alive. Alex didn't say anything as we climbed into his car and sped away from the forest's edge. Neither did I, until we reached my house and he finally broke the silence. "What happened back there?" he asked quietly. I shook my head, unable to explain what I'd seen or heard. All I knew was that we'd made a mistake going into those woods, a mistake we wouldn't repeat. But as I climbed into bed that night and closed my eyes, I realized something chilling. The whispers hadn't stopped when we left the forest. They were still with me, soft murmurs at first, but growing louder with each passing moment until they drowned out every other sound around me. And then they spoke again. "You can't escape." I bolted upright, my heart racing. The room was pitch black, but I could have sworn I saw movement in the corner, a shadow darker than the rest. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I turned on the flashlight. Nothing. The room was empty, but the whispers persisted, a constant hum in the background of my thoughts. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, the aftermath of a frightening experience, but deep down, I knew better. The next morning, I woke to several missed calls from Alex. When I finally reached him, his voice was tense, almost frantic. "Have you looked at the pictures?" he asked without preamble. "What pictures?" "The ones I took in the woods. Just look at them, okay? And call me back." I hung up and opened my messages. Alex had sent a series of photos from our trip to the Whispering Woods. Most were blurry shots of trees and shadows, but the last one made my blood run cold. It was a picture of the well, taken from above, but there, reflected in the dark water at the bottom, was a face, gaunt and pale, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness, and it was looking directly at the camera. I dropped my phone, my hands trembling. The whispers in my head grew louder, more insistent. I could almost make out words now, but they were in a language I didn't understand. I called Alex back immediately. "Did you see it?" he asked as soon as he picked up. "Yeah," I whispered. What the hell is that?" "I don't know, but that's not all. Listen to this." There was a rustling sound, and then I heard Alex's voice, tinny and distant, as if from a recording. "Hey, you think there's anything down there?" It was what he'd said at the well, but after his voice faded, there was something else, a response, barely audible but unmistakably there. "Come and see." The voice was raspy, inhuman. It made my skin crawl. "We need to go back," Alex said when the recording ended. "Are you insane?" I hissed. "After what we saw, what we heard. That's exactly why we need to go back. Don't you want to know what's happening?" I didn't. I wanted to forget the whole thing, to pretend it never happened. But even as I thought this, I knew it was impossible. The whispers in my head were proof enough of that. "Fine," I said finally, "but we go during the day, and we're not staying long." Alex agreed, and we made plans to return to the Whispering Woods that afternoon. As I got ready, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. But curiosity and fear of what might happen if we didn't investigate drove me forward. We arrived at the edge of the woods just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The forest looked different in the daylight, less menacing, but somehow more alien. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches reaching for us like gnarled fingers. "Ready?" Alex asked, his voice tight with anticipation. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The whispers in my head had grown louder the moment we stepped out of the car, as if welcoming us back. We followed the same trail as before, but everything felt different. The air was thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. And the silence, that unnatural quiet that had unnerved me the first time, was even more pronounced in the daylight. When we reached the clearing with the well, I half expected to see the pale face from the photograph staring up at us. But the water was dark and still, reflecting only the cloudy sky above. Alex approached the well cautiously, his camera at the ready. I hung back, every instinct screaming at me to run. "Hello?" Alex called out, his voice echoing in the clearing. "Is anyone there?" For a moment there was only silence. Then, so faintly I almost missed it, came a response. "Welcome back." Alex spun around, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, unable to speak. The whispers in my head had reached a fever pitch, drowning out everything else, and then without warning, they stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to have died down, leaving the woods unnaturally still. "We should go," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. But Alex wasn't listening. He was staring at something behind me, his eyes wide with terror. I turned slowly, dreading what I might see. At first, I saw nothing. Then, like a mirage coming into focus, I noticed movement among the trees, shadows that didn't quite match their surroundings, shifting and swirling in impossible ways, and faces, dozens of them, pale and gaunt, emerging from the darkness between the trees. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, fixed on us with hungry intensity. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Alex's arm and pulling him toward the trail. We ran, crashing through the underbrush, the sound of our panicked breathing drowned out by the whispers that had returned, louder now, angry and insistent. "Stay," they seemed to say. "Join us." I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The shadows were pursuing us, flowing between the trees like living darkness, and with them came the faces, their mouths open in silent screams. We burst out of the woods, not stopping until we reached Alex's car. As we sped away, I looked back one last time. The forest stood silent and still, betraying no hint of the horrors we'd witnessed, but the whispers remained. In the days that followed, Alex and I tried to make sense of what had happened. We pored over his photos and recordings, searching for explanations. But the more we looked, the less sense it all made. The face in the well vanished from the photo, leaving only murky water. The recording of the voice saying, "Come and see," was gone, replaced by static. It was as if the whispering woods were erasing the evidence of their own existence. But they couldn't erase everything. The whispers stayed with us, a constant reminder of what we'd experienced. They were quieter now, but always there, waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I think I see shadows moving in the corners of my room. And in my dreams, I'm back in those woods, surrounded by pale faces and glowing eyes, their whispers growing louder and louder, until I wake up screaming. Alex and I don't talk about it much anymore. What is there to say? We ventured into something beyond our understanding, and now we're paying the price. But sometimes when the whispers grow loud and the shadows seem to close in, I wonder, did we really escape the whispering woods? Or did we just bring a piece of them back with us?